Thank you, Mike and Alice. First of all, I wanted to start off by saying thank you to the UK Internet Governance Forum for inviting techUK to speak at this event. techUK has long been a supporter of the Internet Governance Forum, and it's a real pleasure to be able to be with you today to provide some remarks ahead of what I'm sure will be an excellent day of debate and discussion. First of all, I just wanted to reflect a bit on some of the discussions that took place at this forum last year. In 2022, this meeting held a range of discussions and set out some key messages, including the need to progress the online safety bill, a call to bridge the digital divide, exploring the trade-offs between privacy and security when it comes to encrypted messages, the value of data, concerns around the fragmentation of the internet, and the need to work together to ensure that all voices are heard as we consider how the internet is governed. Now, what's changed since last year? Well, when you think about it, not a huge amount. The need to address the digital divide is as pressing as ever. Privacy and security are still in tension. The splintering of the internet remains a real risk. And yes, the UK's online safety bill is still making its way through Parliament. However, while the issues we've been discussing at this annual forum remain as important as ever, the attention they're receiving has never been greater. Last year, we didn't have the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Elon Musk hadn't finalised his purchase of Twitter. And last year, my grandmother hadn't picked up the phone to ask me, Neil, what is a large language model? Having seen AI debated on Good Morning Britain. Now, the attention all of us in this room will think is rightly deserved, or we know is rightly deserved. We've known the importance of digital transformation for donkey's years. We've understood the importance of promoting trust and data protection. And frankly, we've been talking about AI since before it was cool. However, we're in the spotlight now, and the issues we've been talking about, debating and formulating ideas around are now more important than ever before. This importance also has a new prominence and is coupled with elections looming over the next 12 to 18 months. In the UK, we have a prospect of a major change election. For the European Parliament, the delivery of digital files will be top of the mind. And in the USA, we face an election where the prospect of a highly negative campaign between Joe Biden and Donald Trump could see disinformation and the use of technology in election campaigns on a scale never seen before. This and more makes discussions in this room today more significant than ever before. And it's also in that spirit why techUK wrote our UK Tech Plan, to make sure that as the importance of technology becomes more and more apparent to those in power, that we, alongside our members and our fellow travellers, are in the best position possible to explain to those running for election the benefits and opportunities of technology if got right, and crucially, how to avoid it going wrong. Our plan, given its title of a UK Tech Plan, it's principally focused on the UK, but many of the issues and recommendations it touches on will be familiar in countries across the world. When we set out to research our plan, we aim to do three things. Firstly, we aim to identify the state of play. How is the UK doing when it comes to developing its tech sector and leveraging that success to transform our society and public services? Secondly, can we identify the challenges that stand in the way of the UK using its tech sector to deliver the social and economic benefits that we all know digital technology is capable of? And thirdly, can we find the opportunities for partnership between ourselves, everyone in this room, and the next government that could be seized upon to use technology to build a better Britain? We asked our nearly 1,000 member companies these three questions. So what did we find? On the state of play, despite the wide range of companies we spoke to, a clear and consistent message came back. And that was that while the UK is a strong and dynamic tech market with ambitious plans to further our position as a technology leader, over recent years, we've fallen off the pace and our delivery has faltered. And as it stands, we are at risk of losing our position as a leader in tech and the benefits that can bring for the country. That key message contained a few vital parts. First and foremost, that the UK is fundamentally strong for tech. The UK is a tech-positive society with a high level of internet and smartphone penetration, a flexible labour market, good incentives for innovation, and strong and innovative service sectors. However, a lack of long-term planning, a confused approach to where the UK should align or diverge with EU rules, and a lack of delivery on key strategies for tech has meant that at the moment, we're just simply not reaching the potential we should be. Further, against this backdrops, our members were keenly aware that the race to own, grow and deploy a tech industry was firmly on, and that the UK of late had not been doing as much as the US or the EU to encourage growth in the sector. On the challenges that we have to overcome to deploy tech across our economy and society, we found five. The first one was skills and adoption. How can we ensure that not only we have a workforce and population able to use technology effectively, but also that people, public services and small businesses have the confidence and capability to see tech as something for them. Addressing the scale-up challenge, how can we ensure that the UK's stubborn scale-up gap is bridged so that many of the startups that begin here have the opportunity to become national and global champions? How can we become more competitive for investment? There was a recognition that the UK needs to be more competitive, particularly as the USA and EU are moving to subsidize major industries such as semiconductor manufacturing, green energy, and battery technologies. They need to get better at procuring technology into government and public services, something that, quite frankly, we just need to get better at to ensure that our public services, particularly our NHS and criminal justice system, can survive the challenges the 21st century will throw at them. And finally, improving access to data, ensuring that people, firms, organizations of all sizes are comfortable sharing data to build future innovation. Now, I know what you're thinking. That assessment and those challenges we outlined all sound very difficult and quite a grim situation. However, I don't necessarily agree, and neither did our companies when we asked them. So despite the assessment that our members made about the UK's position as a tech leader, the challenges we face, and the wider mood music around interest rates in the economy, our members were perhaps surprisingly and consistently optimistic. That's because the challenges we face here are not unique. They're the same challenges that governments, civil society, and businesses all around the world face. And there was a sense that the UK was in a good position to overcome them, despite the challenges. So that takes me on to the most important part of our plan, the opportunities that we set out. Having taken an honest look at the state of play for the UK tech and the challenges that confront companies operating here, what are the opportunities for overcoming those challenges through a constructive partnership between the tech sector and the next government? Overall, we find 18 and some additional recommendations on how to change regulation and approach AI to boot as well. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to use my opportunity with you here as a captive audience to run over all 18, but I am going to highlight a few that really piqued our attention and we put front and centre. The first one is the opportunity to secure a £5.69 billion pay rise for the British people by providing the options and support for people to reach their potential with new digital skills. This is a question not just about the provision of courses and lifelong learning, but ensuring that our skills and education system can match people to vacancies that require digital skills and then provide them a pathway to access already existing courses and boot camps to retrain into those jobs. Something we think is possible if we can reform the apprenticeship levy, making it more flexible, and if the government would expand the Department for Education skill toolkit into a proper digital skills learning platform to host and match training courses to those seeking work or those seeking to retrain for a new career. Importantly, these kind of reforms are exactly what we need to ensure the population is ready for the increase in automation and use of artificial intelligence. The opportunity to ensure that the NHS is ready for the future by setting out a long-term plan for how the NHS buys and integrates technology across all of its services. This can only be done by improving the quality of buyers in the NHS system to be able to offer contracts to a wider range of innovative companies and ensuring that as we modernise the health service, it's interoperable with care in the community, and can enable a range of preventative technologies across the health service. This will not only help reduce pressure on hospitals by cutting waiting lists, but also cut the cost of care in the community and begin the transition to a more preventative healthcare system, which we simply need to address our future health challenges. The opportunity to reduce the cost of net zero and cut energy bills also came forward. If we can encourage the national grids to invest heavily in the digitization of the electricity system and increase the uptake of smart technology in new homes to better manage energy consumption, we can not only cut the cost of getting to net zero by billions of pounds, but we can also put more power in the hands of citizens when it comes to how they manage their energy use. The opportunity to boost the British economy by potentially up to £200 billion a year. The UK tech sector currently adds about £150 billion a year, but we think we can reach 200 billion, but we need to take a number of steps to get there. This will come by helping SMEs invest in productivity boosting technology by reallocating some funding the government didn't spend on its Help to Grow Digital programme, by delivering digital connectivity across the country and bridging the digital divide, and leading a British scale-up sprint to build on some of the announcements that were made last night by the Chancellor at Mansion House to remove regulatory barriers and build new investment vehicles to ensure that UK capital and the savings of UK pensioners is driven into UK semiconductors, UK quantum, and UK AI companies, helping not only grow the economy, but ensuring that our savers are invested in and benefit from the bright spots in our industry and future economy. And of course, underpinning all of this is the opportunity to improve safety and trust in technology, which will be absolutely vital to everything I've said so far, and will require action to deliver a cross-regulator online safety sandbox whenever the online safety bill is passed, new data sharing initiatives that could significantly cut online fraud, and developing a system and approach to AI ethics, governance, and regulation that not only sets out clear principles that we can all understand, but is able to flex and adapt as the technology itself evolves. Now, those are just a few of the opportunities that we've identified in our plan, and I look forward to discussing more of them potentially with you later on. However, the importance of all of them is that these are practical suggestions. They're grounded in the technologies of today, from the debates and discussions that we in this forum and others have been discussing for many years. Ultimately, we think we do have the solutions, and now we have the politicians' attention. And over the next year, techUK looks forward to working with you all again to make the case, build the evidence, and win the arguments to ensure that when the elections that I mentioned earlier finally are over, we're all ready and able to put tech at the heart of the solutions to our greatest challenges.
We'll do a bit of a double lap.
Cool, go for it.
Thank you, Neil. I think that was a really interesting speech, and I think really set out the key areas of focus, not only for techUK, but also for all of us to be concerned with across the internet governance community as well. So we now move to a Q&A portion. We've got until about 9:45 for questions and answers. For those of you that are attending online, if you want to submit your question in the chat, we can also hopefully see that in the room here. It's displayed on the screen to my left, your right behind me. So if you would like to submit a question online, please do so. And I'm sure we'll be directed to that during the discussion, and also happy to take any questions in the room. So is there anybody that would like to put a question to Neil? Or do we have any online? You want one there?
Not at the moment, no.
Go ahead. Yeah, just press.
Morning, Neil Sharpley, Federation of Small Businesses. The government revamped R&D credits to make them possibly more attractive to larger businesses. They've always been excluded from those who are non-corporate smaller businesses. What would your message to government be on funding for SMEs in the innovation and the tech sector going forward? Because clearly some of the funding and some of the reliefs are not getting through to the people who most need them.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I also think that the recent reforms that were made in the last budget have meant that the kind of net amount of money that's being put into UK businesses through the R&D tax credit has just simply gone down. The biggest issue that even our larger members and some of our smaller members face is that effectively the R&D tax credit is like constantly chopped and changed. It changes from one year to the next. So you aren't able in a way to kind of build an ecosystem of support and understanding to make sure that it gets down to the kind of hardest to reach businesses. So one thing we've set out on our plan is saying to the next government or to this government, you need to set out a sort of 5-year roadmap for how you're going to reform and change the R&D tax credits, set out the new expenditure that it's likely to cover, how it's likely to be shaped. And we don't expect this all to happen in one way, but if you can set out that roadmap, then you can kind of build the support structure around that. That means it not only gets to the big companies that use it regularly, but also the cost for access for smaller companies will come down over time. Because one thing we have found is that every time it's chopped and changed, it's often either expensive tax credit supporters or other people who are needed to kind of make sure you can get the system, and that's often out of reach for small companies.
Thank you. Yes, Ian.
Thanks, Ian Corby from I'll wear my EU consent hat, which was a European Union funded project to create interoperable age verification. We've been without the Horizon programme now for some time. I don't know whether it's still rumour or it's yet announcement that we are hopefully going back into that. What's your expectation for how long it will take to get that back up and running in the UK? And how would you like to see it sort of evolve from how it was before to how it is in the future?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a real tragedy that Association to Horizon didn't come alongside the Trading Cooperation Agreement in 2020. And I think we would have liked to see the UK want to associate with other schemes like Erasmus and others as well. But, better late than never. And I think we want to see this kind of get up and running as fast as humanly possible. The big benefit of Horizon was the existing structures and the networks that have been built through it. And we find that, despite kind of quite good alternatives being put forward by the government through Pioneer and other forms, those networks and connections that have sustained Horizon are still there. So it does offer a good chance for the scheme to get up and running as quickly as possible. Other people have different views across the best way forward on Horizon Europe. I think for us, it gives a really great platform to join Euro HPC, which is a kind of European-wide high-performance computing network, and will be absolutely vital to make sure that the UK can get the kind of access to compute and supercomputing infrastructure we need to develop the technologies of the future, AI, etc. And that horizon should be a springboard for going back into that very quickly as well.
Thank you very much, Neil. I think we have a question online, and then I'll come up here.
Thank you. I've got a question from Mike Nelson from Carnegie Endowment in Washington, DC. He asks, which country or countries do you think the UK should emulate more? Which governments are providing the most effective digital leadership when it comes to tech policy? And in capital letters, he asks, be specific.
Okay. It's France. Is that specific enough? The French government has done an incredibly good job at trying to support and grow its startup sector. They've really kind of got a grip of the issues that faced kind of French tech, and you can see that it has had a massive explosion in the support for startups and scale-ups with some very specific policies led by the Macron government. So hopefully that's specific enough.
Thank you very much. And I'll just go up here, please.
Hey, thanks for your talk. You talked about Pioneer as kind of one of the perhaps more successful ways of improving startup and scale-up growth. Possibly fair to say that Help to Grow Digital was one of the government's less successful initiatives. What is a good way of improving adoption among perhaps the kind of, not the long tail, but perhaps the group before the long tail of SMEs that haven't yet adopted technology?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Help to Grow, we worked really closely with the government on Help to Grow Digital, supported it. It was a good project to begin with. It suffered from a number of problems, the main one being that the way it was designed didn't bring the voucher to where small businesses actually go to get the technology. We find that in kind of the research we did and the outreach we did since the project was launched, and if there's any small businesses in the room, please correct me if I'm wrong, we find that small businesses tend to trust like authorized resellers or their accountants when it comes to thinking about how to onboard new technology. And it didn't align with the kind of voucher system that the government set out. So sort of having learned from that, having the program not spent any money, we think probably the right way forward is for a kind of quite targeted tax incentive. So that basically your accountant can say, well, if you buy, Sage Intacct or Intuit software or whatever to help you, manage your accounts better or grow your system, you can deduct, 20% off your tax bill. And that's probably the best way of kind of spilling out. Now, I think there's a question which we haven't answered yet, which is how do you ensure that that tax incentive isn't just taken advantage of by the people who are already doing really well and actually target at the place you get the most additional benefits. And I don't have the answer to that question yet, but I think we've worked out that's the pathway to do it. And now how do we target it is a separate question.
So much, Louise.
Louise Bennett, Digital Policy Alliance. As someone who started up some small businesses, I found one of the biggest problems was that anything to do with digital is not capital expenditure, but revenue. And so you can't get help. And the other thing is that I think it would be really good to help every business to have continuous professional development in digital because it changes so much. Do you think that's possible?
I completely agree with what you've said. I think it's quite a difficult situation in the UK in that at the last budget, we had the Chancellor come forward with a really generous tax incentive on full expensing, which is really, really positive, but it does not cover any kind of revenue expenditure or operational expenditure, as you point out. And with the closure of Help to Grow Digital, there is no incentive really, other than in a few small places, for companies to adopt kind of productivity boosting software, which we in this room all know is the thing that really adds benefit to your products and allows you to grow your company. So that's why we're looking at this kind of tax incentive and working out how to deliver it. But your second point is absolutely right as well. It's getting management of companies and giving people the support about how to do that to make sure they can drive change and lead within their company around often new technology, as we'll all have seen. I mean, I'm guilty of this and I'm a big advocate of the tech sector. We get a new CRM system, you're like, oh, how am I going to engage with this? How is it going to work? But if you have someone to drive that positive change in your company, you quickly take advantage of it and you quickly see the benefits of it. So Help to Grow Management has been much more successful than Help to Grow Digital. And we do need to think about other schemes about how to drive that leadership change across organizations. I don't know the exact way of doing it yet, but it's definitely something we need to focus on.
Nigel.
Yes, thank you. Nigel Hickson, DSIT. Morning. Thank you so much for your talk. So a couple of questions, really. One in relation to DSIT and how you see the transformation from DCMS to DSIT, and how that you think might benefit, well, you as techUK, but more widely the business and tech community. The second question in relation to the introduction we heard from Ellie and all the some of the problems in terms of the future of the internet, both in terms of the architecture of the internet and different countries' perceptions on whether one should have a multi-stakeholder approach or a top-down UN approach, and how that might affect internet fragmentation. So it'd be good to get your views on that as the leading sort of business sort of community in terms of that. And the last point was just really a comment on the. I had the privilege to go to your dinner last week. Well, I'm not sure why I was invited, because I don't do much really at all in this area. But what struck me, from talking to people there, and it's a compliment to techUK, but I just think it's just so. It is just so important. Is that the support you gave there to ChildNet, the support that your sponsors give to the community, and especially young people and their aspirations and visions for this technology of the future. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much as well, and I hope you enjoyed the dinner. I think we have tried to we are long partners of ChildNet at that dinner and raise a lot of money every year, which is really important. But as a kind of comment that the president of my organization, the previous president more would say, is that getting young people, people from diverse backgrounds and women into tech isn't nice to have. It's actually a competitive advantage for your company. And we sort of actively encourage our members to kind of go out and make sure that they're doing that. And we've still got a really long way to go. I think no one sort of underestimates the challenge the tech sector still faces in terms of improving diversity and representation, but we are making progress. It could go quicker, and if you've got ideas about how to do that, please do let me know, because we are very committed to that. To go back to your sort of two questions, DSIT, is it good? Absolutely. I think we are really, and I was mentioned at our dinner, we're really pleased with the kind of change in government. It sort of mirrors what a lot of governments around the world have done, kind of putting cross-cutting tech and innovation into a particular department, and it really gives our sector and the outcomes that it can generate a seat at the cabinet table, which is absolutely vital. The sort of think back to the pandemic when it was run under DCMS, and the cabinet secretary at the time would be at the table thinking, okay, do I raise questions around how to keep the internet on, or museums? Those should come from very different departments, and that should be a kind of a key focus. And something what I would also say is that if the Labour Party is thinking about going into government, they should absolutely keep that model, and it's something we've kind of said to them quite firmly. On internet fragmentation, look, I think this is really difficult. It's going to fall along the lines of wider geopolitical movements, such as the decoupling and the sort of split between East and West in many ways. And I think it's also important to recognize that lots of countries, including in the European Union and others, are, starting to look more towards data localization as something that happens in the day-to-day. Now, we need to make sure we can guard against that as much as humanly possible. We all know the kind of drawbacks of that in terms of potentially putting individuals' data or services under authoritarian governments, increasing costs for consumers, and reducing choice. So this is a kind of debate that we need to be having at this forum and others to push back on that as much as humanly possible. But it's definitely going to be a really big challenge. I don't think anyone can sort of shy away from that.
Thanks very much. Are there any other questions in the room? Or online? Yes, sir. No, come on.
My name is Mike Flood. I'm just a member of civil society. I have a small initiative called Fighting Fake. I haven't read the plan. I apologize for that, but I just searched the plan with the words misinformation, disinformation, fake news, and didn't get any hits, which I found rather surprising, since cybercrime now is more than 50% of reported crime. So I would just wonder if you could comment on that. Are you concerned about misinformation? You did mention the issue with the Biden-Trump expecting a massive disinformation campaign. Are you planning to do something on disinformation?
Yeah, so we work with our members quite closely on misinformation, disinformation, and also very specifically on fraud, which is a massive problem in the economy more broadly. I think specifically in the plan, we talk about trying to improve reporting of cybercrime and making sure that kind of the weakest link in the chain is always reinforced. And also we talk about ensuring we can have an online safety sandbox. So that would be making sure that kind of companies can test solutions to address some of the problems that come up that are covered by the bill, which includes a range of online issues. Another thing we've been focusing on quite a lot or thinking about is the role. How do we look when it comes to the regulation of AI? What does that mean in terms of elections, and what's the role of the electoral office in terms of kind of making sure that the regulation is fit for purpose in that space? So it might not be sort of directly sort of expanded on massively in the plan itself, but it's certainly something we're having a look at and have done a bit of work on.
Alice, do you want to go on?
Another online question from Izan Khan. The EU-US data privacy framework that was agreed recently is a positive step forward away from localization, is it not?
Yes.
Fantastic.
When I first started at techUK, I worked on UK-EU Brexit trade negotiations and sort of the tech sector is feeding into that. So the words data adequacy, privacy shield, and Schrems still haunt my nightmares. But these are really, really important things. And we want to make sure that not only do we have schemes that allow data to be transferred globally, but have the right safeguards. And that's why I think this work that the EU and the US has done is so important. And it has been done, we think, to an incredibly high standard. Now it will no doubt be tested in court, and we'll see how that plays out. But it's good to see the kind of work that's gone into that.
I have one question down here and then I'll come up there.
Dave Massell. I'm on Communications Management Association, which is a BCS subspecialist group, and the internet one as chair, as treasurer and stuff. We've had a couple of events, one on Schrems 2 a couple of years ago, one on fake news that defined it in 2016, and one not so long ago that's only started this week to support online safety, where one of the chairs asked us for support. Just generally, do you feel a role for the Royal Charter holders, all of whom are rechartering at the moment? Hence, there's an opportunity for DCIT to get in there and put a DCIT clause in the Royal Charters. Something that allow us to do, if you like, give back at scale with perhaps a much wider viewpoint than any individual. Thank you.
I'm really sorry, I'm not hugely familiar with the sort of work of the Royal Charter and what that would.
I think that's the problem.
Yeah. Which may, as you say, very well be the problem. I'd be interested to hear more about it. And you have a colleague from DCET to your right.
There are at least 5 seniors from the BCS alone here. I'm also in the IET, and I'd also mention the former IISP, CISEC, all of whom want to do good in this space.
Great, thank you.
I'll just go up there and then we'll come down to an online question.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. My name is Michaela. I'm here on behalf of Global Partners Digital. So we're a human rights organization based here in London. I have 2 questions. One related to the to artificial intelligence. Well, both artificial intelligence questions, I should say. One, looking at the tech plan, which congratulations, it's a fantastic document. But just to say, though, I see that you put a lot of emphasis on putting the UK at the forefront of international debates on AI. And I wonder if that's a reference to the upcoming AI Safety Summit, and would be keen to hear what techUK's involvement would be and whether there's opportunities for civil society and human rights defenders to be involved in that planning. That's something that I would definitely be interested in hearing more about. On a related note, while I commend the effort to include references to AI ethics and the governance of AI, one element that I found was a bit lacking was references to specifically international human rights law, or the UNGP, or references to human rights more specifically. And I wonder if there's a possibility of maybe integrating that a bit more deeply into the work of techUK and this plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, look, on the first issues, so we wrote the plan before the AI summit was announced. So we were really pleased to see it happen. And one of the criticisms, I think, or one of the things we would call on the UK government to do is to make sure that civil society organisations, human rights organisations are involved. I think while it was really great, and we've got a lot of companies who are really interested in being engaged in this debate, the sort of press release when they announced the AI summit was just businesses. And actually you want to include as many people as possible. I don't know if it's sort of specifically referenced in the plan, but certainly we've mentioned it in other places. But unless the technology is trusted and people feel empowered to use it, it's not going to get used. And that's when you kind of start to lose the benefits of AI technology. So yeah, I would totally agree with that point. On techUK's role in the summit, I mean, I think we're still waiting to hear from the government about how we can do that and how we can get more involved. We certainly asked, and you know, again, as I say, we'll be encouraging other people, them to involve a kind of wide stakeholder network as possible. On AI ethics, governance, human rights law, and what we do. So we do a lot of work with the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. On that, we actually hosted the launch of their AI assurance toolkit at techUK, and we've been working very closely with that organisation to kind of develop that and have a very strong partnership. I don't know if we've done as much as we probably could have done on sort of international human rights law. It might be because we're a very sort of UK-based organisation, but it obviously has an important role to play.
So much. I think we had a question online, didn't we?
Did indeed, from Jolie McPhee from ISOC. Is the plan in favour of unbreakable end-to-end encryption to safeguard all users?
It's not specifically mentioned in the plan, but I think this is something we need to be sort of very careful about. You know, the debate around privacy and encryption is sort of being aired hugely when it comes to the sort of the online safety bill. And I think we can all sort of appreciate what the aims of that bill are, but there's obviously potentially huge unintended consequences. And probably there's quite a lot more work to be done to identify what is the sort of practical solution here that can sort of achieve the aims of the bill, but also ensure that we aren't creating backdoors into encrypted messaging systems, which benefit, you know, a huge range of people, whether it's people from protected characteristics or from countries where there are more oppressive regimes.
Should we go to Andrew?
Hi, thank you. Andrew Camping, 419 Consulting, and a trustee of the Internet Watch Foundation. Perhaps following on from that question, I don't know if techUK has any thoughts about how some of the tech companies, including, dare I say, members of techUK, hide behind things like end-to-end encryption to try and duck their responsibilities for blocking the spread of CSAM material, and whether that's something which is addressed or should be addressed in the plan.
I mean, I can't speak on behalf of any of those companies. I would sort of suspect that they hopefully aren't doing that. But it is exactly as the question I pointed out earlier, it's a difficult tension between the two. There are trade-offs if you break encryption, and so we need to kind of make sure that we address this as much as possible. The Digital Regulation Corporation Forum did quite a big deep dive into this, and we kind of encourage more of that sort of work to, as I say, try and find the sort of practical solution that can address the issue the online safety bill is trying to tackle, which is hugely important, but also make sure that we don't have any kind of massive unintended consequences, which I think we're all aware of.
Hi, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for hosting this event. I was wondering, how far are we to develop some AI facial recognition for police force, for example, and counterterrorism, and tools that could potentially enhance the policing in the UK, which, in my opinion, would quite fill the eyes of the government, maybe even either this government or the next one. What is the forecast for these implementations to help law enforcement?
So there's a bit of a back and forth on this issue, which is facial recognition technologies do exist and can be used, but you've got to be very, very careful about the data that underpins them and the legal frameworks around how the technology is used. Because ultimately you could end up in a situation, if it's trained on her data, where you either arrest people or put people in the front of the criminal justice system for inappropriate reasons. And we've got to get to a place where if you're going to use the technology properly, it functions effectively. That's the only way that you're going to build trust in it or ensure that it sort of works properly for police forces. I mean, lots of our members have been calling on the government to set out a kind of clear legal framework for how to develop these technologies with a bend towards what standards you need, how you should develop and deploy them, and how they should be used. I think unless we get that kind of clear legal framework first, the market's not going to properly develop because people will be a bit anxious to try to deploy them and sell them to different services.
Which makes sense. I appreciate your answer, sir. Thanks.
Yeah, Rick Chandler, Communications Management Association. I was looking at the, I've been mentoring startups for probably at least 10 years now. I'm involved in the communications industry for more than 30.
I'm seeing a lot of the assets that could be developed here and whatever being taken outside this country by basically lack of investment here. At the launch of DCIT at Mobile World Congress, I was talking to the ministers there and they're saying, well, no, that's inward investment. I see it as asset stripping. We've lost our chip industry recently. We've lost, we're in the process of losing large parts of our space industry. Do you think we ought to have some measures in the bill to actually protect those technologies that are key to us, to stop them being stripped out by other countries?
Yeah, so I think the point you make around what, as companies start to grow, the share of kind of foreign investment starts to grow as well. And there's inevitably a risk that if you're the later end of your startup and scale-up ecosystem is dominated by international investment, that it might move abroad, because it means that people get put on boards, decisions get made, etc. So there are sort of two solutions to that. First of all, is you've got to increase the share of UK-based capital in the conversation, something which I think the Chancellor made some very positive steps on last night at Mansion House. But even if we can increase the share of UK capital, we also have to remove the impediments to companies growing and scaling in the UK. And that includes things like the talent pipeline, as well as the planning system so that people can build, and also ensuring that we have a kind of regulatory system that encourages investment into innovative technologies. One particular sector which I've been focusing a lot is the semiconductor industry. And even if you can get all the capital investment you need from a UK source to grow the company, you look up and down the country and you can't find a site or an energy grid connection within the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So inevitably you end up moving to Texas because you can get the capital there and you can build the site tomorrow. So it's those both of those have to be fixed, both the capital investment, but also the restrictions to growth.
Do you want to come back in?
No, I was going to say I was involved in the chip industry many years ago. One of my committee is a councillor in Cambridge with a 1 billion investment from Huawei being tabled. I've suggested many times to him that if they said, well, if you build a fab plant next to ARM, that would be a major way around the how you say the blockage of the Trump era. I just don't see the commitment from government to keep the technologies here. We have a very good, in the top 50 universities in the world, we've got at least usually 10 or 12. The first EU one is number 50. Yeah. Why do we not capitalize on that? Anyway, sorry.
As a sort of reflection, it takes us back to the kind of key finding of the tech plan at the top, which is the fundamentals are great, but we're not capitalizing on it effectively.